Okay, so I'm bored. Well, Progress isn't coming out until 2 weeks after this video comes out, so I'm not going to talk on the magical girls for a bit. But then what am I going to talk on? Well, here's a story that I have to tell you all that led me to making this video. So I was working on a different video, which was me describing every single abnormality that Project Moon has released, including the Wonder Lab ones, in a single sentence. Now, I cancelled making that video because it may seem like a cool video in concept. In practice, it's kind of meh. It's too quick for my liking, it doesn't describe the abnormality enough to fully understand what it is, etc. But then, now what do I do? Well, with only a few days to make a video, I thought to myself, what is a good video that I can make that is similar to what I usually make? Well, I looked through the script of the cancelled video and saw them, the Tool Abnormalities, that I wrote on and thought to myself, well, there's no video that talks about them that is recent, and Tool Abnormalities are unique, I'll say. So, why not make a video on them? So here we are, talking about the 17 objects of interests known as Tool Abnormalities, which are, you must be happy, we can change anything, old faith and promise, mirror of adjustment, behavior adjustment, luminous bracelet, skin prophecy, heart of aspiration, Derisha, giant tree sap, notes from a crazed researcher, portrait of another world, shelter from the 27th of March, flesh idol, expression to hell, Yan, and backward clock. I know that this may seem like a lot, well, 17 is a lot, but to be honest, considering the stories that they have and the simplistic nature of the abnormalities themselves, well, I don't think it'll take that long. So anyways, let's start off with T-09-94 is a Zayin class abnormality that some may know as the original "Do you love the city you live in" kind of abnormality, until Happy becomes strong took over as the reason why most people look at it and recognize the meme, and forgot that it was an aberration of "you must be happy." And also, the abnormality in general is kinda, all in all, forgotten. Now, "You must be happy" is a medical chamber, a chamber that uses its claw hands to operate on the person that enters the chamber, and that operation is described to be efficient. This machine was designed to pull back the skull and destroy nerve tissue safely and efficiently. Many of those who underwent an operation inside the machine have found themselves rested and healthy again. Despite being worn out, "You must be happy" is, as said before, efficient. But that's all there is to it. It is a very good medical machine that manipulates your nerves to make you feel better. Then in that case, why is it considered to be an abnormality? Well, it's the question that it asks is the reason why it would be considered as such. Do you love your city? And the answer to that question will be the final nail of if you are considered to be healthy or not. Those who answered yes to the question, "Do you love your city?" were deemed cured. Those who answered no weren't allowed to discharge. The longer a machine is in use, the better a person becomes. Furthermore, the longer it is used, the faster the question will change. Now, are there other questions that we know of? No. But will it be interesting to know? Sure. But that's practically all that we can get from it. This tool is something that, what I'd say, represents the pressure of the city, and whether you like living in it or not, and whether that kind of pressure will destroy you or not. And that kind of pressure doesn't leave you any time to consider the questions asked. And that's practically all there is to "You must be happy," huh? So little, yet a lot to ask. "You must be happy" is an alright-ish tool abnormality. Can be cool. Now, let's move on to the next one. T-09-85 is another Zayin abnormality that is literally just an Iron Maiden, but advertised as something that can literally change anything. Made by the same people who made the all-around helper, XX Inc., who surprisingly isn't mentioned a whole lot. Like, what is XX Inc.? Is it X-Core before it became a wing? But that doesn't really make sense since X-Core is a wing that focuses on excavation of minerals. Hell, they even have a bunch of knights that deal with said thing. And also, that kind of wing doesn't really match with the robotic yet murderous tool of XX Inc., but that deserves a video of its own at another time. So back to this thing. As said before, "We Can Change Anything" was made after the popularity of the all-around helper skyrocketed, and just like all-around helper, it can do a few things. Advertised as something that can quite literally change anything. Is your child a troublemaker who cries all the time? We can change that. Don't like how you look? Are you too fat, too skinny? We can change that. Is your house suffering from an outage because you don't have the money to pay for the power bill? We can change that. And how, some might ask? Well, you just step inside the machine and turn it on and let it do the job, which is to stab at you so many times with a good amount of heat until they die and become just a slab of cooked meat, as heard by the sound cue when it opens. Now, one question, why? Well, actually, I have a couple, but I'll leave those for later. But overall, it's quite a unique tool that kills your employee at the price of a ton of energy. Now, is the advertising a lie? No, not really. Same with all-around helper to a certain extent as well. But it doesn't mention the bloody reality that it actually has. So, oh well. Next one. T-09-97 is yet another Zayin abnormality that is kinda strange looking. Old Belief and Promise, which for some reason it's called Old Faith and Promise in the Underground Wiki, are essentially two lizards made out of puzzles that are above and below an orb that can change color when using it. And what is that usage? Well, the game describes using it as an ancient practice, the countless promises that were made, and the unending faith placed in them, that only yielded hollowness and betrayal. Those betrayed hearts sank into the depths, slowly forgotten in the ever-lengthening corridors of time, and that if you make an attempt with an austere heart devoid of desire or expectation, however, you may receive an unexpected reward. Essentially, if you believe in the orb and promise faith to it, all that you will get is betrayal and become sad. But if you expect nothing much out of the orb, then you'll get a cool reward. Now, this is how the game describes it as. I myself, and everyone else, would much prefer to calling it a gambling machine. Like, you use it for a weapon to be buffed for only a single day and that's it. Like, it's not even that good. But whatever. Other than that though, yeah, that's practically all there is to say on that thing. It literally says as to what it's meant to represent. False faith and betrayal. Like, come on. Now on to the next one. O-09-81 is the last Zayin tool abnormality. There's far too many similarities to the mirror tech that Yisan has, but it's not. Let's get that fact straight. Mirror of adjustment has nothing to do with the mirror tech. It's just very similar is all. Now, as the name implies, the mirror of adjustment is just that, a mirror. A mirror that only shows people. The story describes this as, when facing oneself in the mirror, the subject changes. Whenever we face each other in the mirror, we can see ourselves. Sure, it's slightly altered due to how mirrors work, showing the opposite and alike, but the one thing that makes this one special is how it may have a possible linkage to a parallel universe or magical powers, or have magical powers, but none of this can be confirmed. AKA, when you are using the mirror, it may seem like you were looking at yourself, but you are actually looking at a different version of you. That's why all the stats get randomized when you have an employee using it. It's actually just a different version of the employee that you have. But there is a slight warning though. Looking into the mirror multiple times will gradually eat away one's humanity, until they become indistinguishable from a hollowed husk of a man, so caution is advised. Which, one, is quite a cool concept that makes sense. Logically, if you're looking at a lot of multiple versions of yourself, you will eventually degrade yourself enough to become someone completely different. But secondly, if there is one thing I do hope to happen with the mirror tech and Limbus is that since we have so many identities, I hope that we eventually get to a plot point where we just have too many uncertain things happening that the mirror worlds are just starting to crack and things just no longer make sense. It's already happening somewhat with the Ishchan ID and partially with the Yisan one from the trailer as well, and that our characters start to change because of the mirror tech. That would be a cool plot point. But either way, we still have more tools to cover, so let's move on. O-09-96 is a Teth level tool abnormality that is quite simple amongst other Teths, I'd say. It's a circular device that has an eye symbol on it. Where did it come from? Who made it? No one knows. It just exists. And since it's a device, what does it do then? Well, it readjusts everyone to become righteous, no matter how wicked, evil, and arrogant they may be. AKA, it turns everyone who picks it up into good boys, as their justice stats increase, which may seem nice on paper, but there's a good reason why it's there in the first place. However, its users will become too dependent on the device and lose all ability to think on their own, and eventually intellect loses all meaning as they forget even how to exist, which they forget about all of that by ripping their eyes off. Yep, growing too dependent on this thing, or I guess any one thing, leads you to a path of being too dependent on that thing or person. So that's cool. And as said in the beginning, very simple. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. We're on a roll right now. O-09-95 is another Teth class tool that is, yet again, quite simple. It's a bracelet. A luminous bracelet that does only one thing: heal. When you wear it, all wounds are healed without a trace of scarring, which is very nice to have. After all, it is an artifact from the outskirts, so extra healing is nice. But to wear this bracelet, even when one has not a scratch left on their body, is an act of greed, and this bracelet shall not forgive those who hold greed in their hearts. Thus, it must only be worn by by those in true need. AKA, it can overheal you and kill you for wanting to have this thing heal you all the time, even when you don't need it. Which makes sense. You don't want to be a greedy boy and heal for an extra bit because of that, would you? But it can also kill you if you return it, which was never really explained why, but I guess this thing just wants to make sure that you are actually fine and well, I guess. Now, is that all? Yes. I hope you're seeing the trend between all the tools that I have mentioned so far. Now, let's move onwards to T-09-90 is a Teth level tool abnormality that I did promise to talk on in my previous video. Please watch it. The algorithm didn't praise that video to a lot of people. Please, for God's sake, watch it. After this video though. So, Skin Prophecy is a big and ancient looking religious book that rests on top of a skinny lectern made of skin and muscle and the like, with a lot of things written on it. Now, why is it made of skin and muscle? Well, that's because its believers prayed that its sanctity would last forever by binding it home in human skin. Very simple and reasonable, I'd say. So what is written on this book then? Well, those who open the book will be enlightened to unimaginable truths. The ones who have mastered the truths will be called by the prophets. This call cannot be denied, which are the hands that come from hell itself, by the way. And the story leaves itself off with, "Save us now and forevermore. The truth shall set us free." Well, whoever wrote this book, or whatever, definitely has a lot to write on. Well, whatever it may be, this thing represents essentially how the occult works. Kinda, I guess. And how they believe in something so much that they consider it the absolute truth, I guess. Not much else to say on it, and again, if you want to know more on skin prophets and a couple other abnormalities, then watch this video, please. I believe this is the only tool that has gotten an actual abnormality version in Ruina. Well, I'd say that it is deserved for being genuinely one of the best tool abnormalities with little to no downsides. T-09-77 is yet another Teth class tool abnormality that is actually pretty cool to talk on. The heart of aspiration is, as the name implies, a heart with some clot in it. This heart is interesting as it still beats even after being removed from its body. Why is that? Well, it's because of said aspiration. A hope to achieve something. It wants to beat onwards until something has been achieved. Using it essentially increases the borrower's vigor and strength, with the only downside being that if you don't do anything within the first 30 seconds, or without attacking anything, the user becomes frenzied, wanting to attack anything and anyone nearby with excessive aspiration. Overall, a pretty simple yet cool abnormality to talk on. A heart that is kind of afraid of their user to fail, so it enhances their strength just enough to achieve something. But that's just Lobotomy Corporation. As for Arena though, the heart of aspirations have two things that I can talk on. Firstly, the heart is accompanied by lungs of craving, which is kind of neat to look at. They fulfill the same role as the heart, but in lung form, to make sure that they keep on breathing again and again for aspiration, or craven, I guess. But the second thing is Angela, who aspired to be human, had her artificial heart beat fervently and fast as she came closer and closer to her goal. But she was impatient. She became maddened by excessive aspiration. Overall, a pretty cool abnormality to talk on, but we're not done yet. We have 9 more to go. Now, with that, we are now over halfway there, so yeah, if you can, please subscribe. And the usual that everyone else asks you for in a lot of videos. Now, T-09-09, God, that's a lot of charm tools, huh? Is the last Teth tool before we move on to the He class. Now, Teresia is simply a music box with a ballerina on it. When wound up, a sad melody begins to play. No one knows when it was made or who made it, but it doesn't seem to be new judging from the slight skips in the song. The sad melody, of course, recovers SP to all employees in the area, but because of it being a sad melody, with some slight skips, it will make the person listening to it go mad and panic, which is kind of weird if you consider it to be a gift from someone saying, "Do you remember this melody? The professor used to play this song when the students were sleepy. Happy birthday." Which is kind of weird to have a song that makes one lose grip on reality and be driven mad when it's been listened to for a long enough time. But overall, not much else to say on the tool, which is sad because this one actually had some potential to be cool. T-09-80 is a He level tool abnormality, which I can easily summarize as a more useless fucking version of Luminous Bracelet. Giant tree sap is a sap of a giant tree that comes from the outskirts at the edge of the world, covered in bodies and were quote-unquote melted, leaving smoldering green remains that the giant tree would use as nutrients, reaping what it sowed. Now, it says that you would melt if you drink the giant tree sap, but truth is that you actually just explode after suffering the side effect of drinking it for more than 30 seconds. So that's something. Now, what is this giant tree in the edge of the world? No fucking clue. Is there anything else to add on to that? Don't think so. Anyways, next one. This one is probably one of my more least favorite abnormalities to cover here. T-09-78 is another key level tool that are, well, kinda mad to me. They're just a bunch of notes from a researcher in Lobotomy Corporation that became mad from certain experiments until he was quote unquote born again, and that's it. Now, what do these notes also contain? Well, it begins with guilt and confessions of unethical experimentations, but gradually spirals into madness, overrun with insane and broken up sentences about research towards the end. And that's it. To be honest, I really couldn't give that much of a damn about a bunch of notes that can explode you from literally anything for a sharp increase of temperance. Oh well. Anyways, thank God the last 6 are actually at least somewhat interesting. O-09-91 is another key level tool abnormality that is actually quite cool. Portrait of Another World is an empty painting that, when you interact with it, the portrait essentially paints a current version of you onto it and encaptures the moment. It will show the current version of you, the you that is essentially quite healthy, and will remain healthy as long as possible, but at the cost of sacrificing many others. Any damage that they would have taken will instead be applied to others and around them. And as time passed, the painting became uglier and uglier until there is only the person who has been etched onto the portrait left. With no one to take in the damage or sickness that they would have had, they will die alone, with an empty portrait to take its place once more. Overall, it's quite a cool tool abnormality, and it's probably the coolest key level tool abnormality to exist, actually. The painting doesn't really have much to represent other than how people want to prevent change, be afraid of it, and all that, but at the cost of everyone else leaving and dying, you know? Anyways, on to the last key level tool. T-09-82 is the last key level tool abnormality that is kinda unique. Unlike other tool abnormalities, shelter is, well, a shelter. It's not like an object or an item. It is a big room that houses a large number of non-perishable goods, which would allow anyone who stayed inside to survive for an extremely long period of time. And along with that, everyone that is inside the bomb shelter is saved and can't be hurt from anything or anyone from the outside, which from the inside of it makes the outside world seem to be even more hopeless. Now, for the case of the abnormality, sure it does that. Everything is extremely chaotic with abnormalities escaping, but in the case of P-Core, I'd say it's just a matter of perspective, I think. And speaking of, yes, the goal of P-Core is to make the safest place on Earth, as mentioned in Canto 7. Hell, the abnormality logs even directly reference them as Company P, which also provides another reason as to why I think that XX Inc. is not X-Core, by the way. Now, this is just an abnormality or a representation of P-Core's wish of creating the safest place on Earth. If that wasn't the case, then P-Core wouldn't be dabbling with Don Quixote for research on making something similar as the shelter. But there is one other thing that I should mention though. It's that this tool abnormality is a shelter of a specific day, not just in general, the 27th of March. Whatever that day could mean to both P-Core and its representation could have, I'm not sure. Maybe it's supposedly the motivation that P-Core founders had to make the safest place on Earth, just like how K-Core and T-Core's founders were with their own journeys and finding their own motivations. But whatever. Now, let's move on to the last 4 WoW level tools. This one is kind of disappointing to talk on, to me at least, especially since it had a lot of potential at a glance, but was received in disappointment after looking a bit further into it. T-09-79 is a WoW level tool abnormality that resembles a cross, a fleshy cross with some scrap if you want to be extra specific. It looks cool, but the problem that I have with it is how simplistic compared to the other tool abnormalities. Flesh Idol was a religious artifact found in the flooded district, wherever that may be, and whenever someone prays to it, the flesh in the cross will start moving and the supplicant will suffer various ordeals in a manner like being put through a trial, while everyone else will be healed and be fine. But after a minute and a half, the prayer shall inevitably end with the eternal despair of its worshipper, and kill the person praying and release every single damn abnormality out. And that's it. I mean, look, it's most certainly a better tool than some, but I felt like there could have been more to it than just, oh, it's a cursed idol that you should pray for benefits, but because of this curse, you shouldn't pray for too long, or else everyone is fucked and all that. It feels too simplistic when I can just simplify it with just a few words, you know? Now, it doesn't mean that it's a bad abnormality, it's just a bit underwhelming for me, you know? Anyways, moving on. T-09-86 is another WoW level tool abnormality that caused a lot of people who played LobCorp to have nightmares of micromanaging this thing. This one is also quite simple really, but not as much as Idle. Express Train to Hell has two parts to it, the mysterious train booking clerk and the actual train. There are no clocks to inform when the train arrives, and instead uses some lights to inform you of when the train is coming. These lights are very beneficial as they essentially heal you and everyone else depending on when you book a ticket. But when all four lights are illuminated, the train will chug down the tracks and sound its mighty horn. There is no doubt that it will plunge through the endless tunnel while boarding the employees who have not taken a step back from the tracks, which is a very cool sight to behold. Though, again, it's quite simple, but not too underwhelming, because it's kind of cool and unique. I don't really know what this thing is meant to represent. Maybe it has something to do with rushing to get things done, otherwise, if you take your time, something will kill you, I guess. The most basic kind of representation, I guess, but whatever. Anyways, 2 more hours to go. Okay, so I've already covered this one, and I'm not a big fan of repeating things. I'll just summarize what Yan is, and if you want to know more about Yan, Yin, the dragon, and some assumptions I had on Hanlu's ego before it came out, then go to this video and watch him. Otherwise, I'll just summarize Yan here real quick. O-07-103 is a WoW level tool abnormality that is very cool. Based off of the concept of Yin and Yang, aka the concept of good and bad, light and dark, and how the both of them intersect with each other. In LobCorp, Yin and Yang are not fully intersecting. They are separate beings, actually, with some aspects of each other. In Yan's case, it gives out good luck and heals mental damage. It's good for others, but in its mind, it's kind of evil. Well, not really evil, but more like uncaring, so to say. And when Yin tries to combine with Yan, they become a dragon, yada yada yada. Let's move on to the last tool abnormality. D-09-104 is the last tool abnormality that we have to cover, and it's very cool. Appearance-wise, it's a big steampunk-esque machine with some lights and a wind-up key. The story says that backward clock was made by an unknown company, but let's be honest, it's by T-Core. The design and appearance kind of give it away. The interesting thing is that it says that its manufacturer stopped making these clocks a long time ago, which is quite interesting. Now, it's advertised in the story as something to rewind your wasted time, aka if you use the machine and once it works, you will be standing at the exact moment you wish to be in, whenever that may be. If you're currently struggling right now with whatever big major problems you may have now, you can just use the backward clock to move into a different and better time. Now, in the game, it's definitely a bit different, where instead of sending the user back, it sends everyone else to the most peaceful time of the day, sacrificing that one dude. Now, why is that? I'm not sure, but it's pretty cool nonetheless. Ew. Hopefully this video is not as long as it seems. Like, this is probably the longest script that I've ever written, and may seem like a very long video to me, but I don't want to complain too much. Now, you may have noticed that I have a certain dissatisfaction with these tool abnormalities, and that is for good reason. Despite the fact that, yes, some of the tool abnormalities are cool and unique, a lot of them are kind of meh. Some of them feel like they shouldn't be abnormalities in the first place and are just random unique objects found and taken by Alcor for some reason. And the rest just don't have much to talk on, unlike a regular abnormality, which has a good amount of talk on. Tool abnormalities kind of suffer from having surface level resources to talk on. Now, there are exceptions, of course, but to me, tool abnormalities are kind of just not at all interesting to talk on, at least for me. Anyways, next video, magical girls, so expect that, and bye.